I just came to the medicine path because the Western world told me that I was incurable and there was nothing I could do about it and I was going deaf. You can heal yourself through rewriting the story, because rewriting the story around what is happening is the ultimate path to freedom.
Part of the healing journey is to put someone in the deepest energetic and sacred alignment and then trust what happens.
I believe that my hearing game has gifted me the opportunity to listen more than most. I've been given a gift that's like a bullshit filter.
We can cut this part out if you want, but the time that you wanted to learn more about being a lesbian.
I watched and I actually brought snacks.
I'm Layla Martin. I'm your host of This Tantric Life. This podcast is for you to learn about and be able to use the incredibly powerful system of Tantra in your life. I have been teaching and studying classical and neo-Tantra for over 20 years. And when you apply that to sex, love, and relationships, as I love to do, you end up having conscious relationships, the deepest, most epic and magical sex, and the kind of intimacy that you get to be grateful for on your deathbed. And I want you to have your own magical journey in your own way that takes you from wherever you are now to the most outrageous and true and beautiful expression of sex, love, and relationships that is available to you. So I'm here to let you know that if you want to stay connected to my teachings and if you want to support this podcast, the best way to do it is to sign up for my email list. Email list sounds old school, and yet it is where I share my most intimate teachings, the path, process, heartbreak, and triumph of my life, and so much of the content that I make for you on a regular basis. So the way you get on the email list is by heading over to laylamartin.com, put your email address into any of the boxes. You can also sign up for cool practices like sex magic or energy orgasm, totally free. Heading on over to laylamartin.com, signing up with your email address. This supports the podcast. It supports this entire work and is the number one way for you to receive the highest teachings of this path. Hi, and welcome to This Tantric Life. I'm your host, Layla Martin. I'm so excited to share with you today Blue, one of my all-time favorite humans to grace planet Earth. We were talking about what to call her before she came on. I'll tell you what I call her. I call her a spiritual teacher, a leader, a force of nature, an energy healer. But really, what she is someone who channels truth and wisdom and vibration of higher consciousness in a way through her body, through her voice, through her song, through her prayer that uplifts everyone around her. She is a full up-leveling human. She has a platform of teaching called Florescence, which upgrades women into their healing powers, their spiritual wisdom, their higher vibrational existence. She has an amazing podcast called Deja, one of the absolute most popular spirituality podcasts available out there. And as someone who had the honor and privilege of living with her, of being her friend, the moment she walked into the door and into my life, I was struck by a woman of such grace, such beauty in all dimensions, and a woman who was able to channel and speak truth of the highest frequencies in a way that has blown me away time and time again. So I'm so excited for her to be here and to share her wisdom with us today. Welcome, Blue.
Well, I'm all melting in a puddle right now, girl. You really know how to open up that heart space. Yeah, I'll take a little bit of words affirmation over here. Thank you.
She's also a Southern grandma.
Yeah, I don't know where that comes from, but my alter ego is a very old Southern grandma, and she got something to say, okay? Maybe she'll come out later. But anyway, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, honey, don't you know I have a Georgia Southern peach in me because I grew up in Peachtree City, Georgia for some of my formative years.
Oh, well, nice to see you here, lady. Maybe we'll get a little crazy later, but for now, I'm just going to drink my green juice.
I'm going to get invited by a boy to the local school dance. All right. Woo! All right. So I want to take you to a moment between me and Blue, which is we sat in ceremonial space at the Queendom, which was an amazing, I always used to call it a palace for witches, a space that we all lived in the Palisades in Los Angeles together. And in that ceremonial space, Blue was doing deep healing activations. And she would take us one by one and spend time with us in a healing space. And I was the last one to go. And I did what you're not supposed to do, which is I did a plant medicine ceremony after doing a 10-day trip to Antarctica and then flying through Orlando. And I did none of the things that you're supposed to do on Dieta, meaning I may or may not have had a threesome with a rock star. I may or may not have done various different substances. I may or may not have stayed up all night for like 10 days straight, partying to dark DJs. And then I was like, now we're going to get spiritual. So I was basically lying face down on the floor for about 36 hours trying to deal with my system catching up to the ceremony that was available. I do not recommend that. People, stay clean, follow your dieta. There's reasons why. There is guidance around that. And Blue so graciously on the second night took me into what I would have called her healing field and began to sing prayers over me. I'll have her explain a little bit more of what happened. And it was like a calling forward at first of every part of me that was still embedded in unworthiness from my family, from my ancestry, from my upbringing generally. And the cool thing about those medicine spaces and about working with a healer of her caliber is it calls forward what is ready to be seen, ready to be integrated, ready to be healed. And I wouldn't have even said that unworthiness, that I was so embedded in it. It was so unconscious, right? It was like being a fish in water. I was swimming in unworthiness and I didn't even know it. And her prayer and her healing allowed me to literally see myself walking into a space and what it would be like and feel like if I held myself in the truth of what I am, the truth of my beauty, the truth of my power, the truth of my wondrousness. And we all deserve that, not a beauty, wondrousness, and power above others, but just a truth. Like a mirror of truth, of seeing oneself. And it was like her prayers purified my being. And this unworthiness that was wrapped around my DNA, my cells, my very considerations of myself started to unravel and wave off of me. And she sang prayer after prayer and it kept unraveling. And so the majestic beauty of her continues to blow me away over and over again. But that moment was so potent, her ownership of her healing powers, her ownership of her song, her ownership of prayer. It's so much of the heart of what I've known of her power and her work. So Blue, I would love to hear both a little bit about like that moment, what that sort of healing feels like for you, what you experience. And then also, how did you give yourself such permission to become a healer, an aligned being of such caliber and at such a young age?
It's so beautiful to reflect back on that moment, and through your words, so well articulated, allowed me to go right back into that moment with you. And truly sharing that kind of space is like the deepest level of intimacy. Into me you see. It's the no more masks. Everything that I'm carrying, I bear all of it here. And in the full trust and the full surrender that you gifted me allowed me to really actually be with you in it. And those spaces are the most real spaces that exist to me, because there is no story anymore. It just is what is. Whatever is welcome here. There is no right and wrong. There's no binary experience. It's just the most sacred thing is what is. And for me, when I'm experiencing you on the healing mat, we call it the healing mat. It's a space where I get to share my attention, intention, or place it into the genuine healing in the highest timeline available for your soul signature and your soul's expression. Now, the most important thing is I never ever work on anybody on the healing mat if I'm feeling anything but love. So what I'm experiencing when you're laying on the healing mat is I genuinely fall in love with you. I'm completely enamored by your beauty. I see only your pure potential. I'm completely awe-inspired by the magnificence of the potential and the present moment of who it is that you are, challenges and gifts. And in that moment, what it does is it creates a cocoon and a bubble of light around you. I almost like to see it like a butterfly silk cocoon. And I say a prayer before I go in. There's a prayer that I place into the space that sets the tone or pushes the first domino of the intention. And the prayer looks a little bit something like, May this be a place of unconditional love and only unconditional love, and all that's ready to be transmuted back to its original form of unconditional love. Please use me for a vessel and service for the greatest good of Layla Martin and the healing of her highest timeline. May all that is not rooted in genuine unconditional love for herself and for others be transmuted through my heart, through my hands, as I become one with this being, melt my own identity of who I think I'm supposed to be or any previous healings, and allow myself to melt in that which is needed so that I can truly be of genuine service. May all of my own personal experiences be transmuted so that I can actually be of complete service to my sister in this present moment. Show me and guide me beyond my mind and allow everything to touch my heart without touching my mind at all. And so it is. Something along those lines of that. I then stay in the listening.
Something along those lines. Give or take a few words.
It's just a casual prayer, you know? We just like rock into a casual prayer.
You're like, obliterate my illusory sense of ego and let me become one with the human in front of me in unconditional love. Just another Tuesday evening.
Straight up. The amount of times when I've been like, wow, that was just another Tuesday. But if it happened in my life, it's just like comical at this point. I end up just laughing to myself because the beautiful thing is when we start tapping into genuinely our imagination, we can only create as far as our imagination is willing to go. And my imagination lies as the default in magic. Then the creation that comes from that is just a really fun playing ground, specifically when you can meet somebody else in that space. And this has been, first and foremost, a little bit of a back end as like how this has locked in or anchored into my being. Before we go into actually what happened with us, is that I didn't choose this. This is not something that I woke up and was like, I'm going to go into the healing space. I'm going to wield altered states of consciousness to help reprogram past belief systems that are not rooted in a sense of self-love. Like there was no timeline that I chose that. You're like, well, this life, like I didn't choose this life chose me. Like, well, yeah, actually. And I merely just came to the medicine path because I was experiencing tremendous hearing loss and I was going deaf in my 20s and I didn't know what the heck was happening. And it was one of the scariest, most discombobulating experiences of my entire life and continues to be so. And I just came to the medicine path because the Western world told me that I was incurable and there was nothing I could do about it and I was going deaf. And I just could not receive that diagnosis. Like there was something in my being, in my belief, in my imagination that was like, this isn't the truth with a capital T, this is one truth. And so I went on the inquiry of how can I heal this experience for myself? And it took me on a really deep road of like, where am I not listening? When am I not actually listening when people tell me their name when I walk into a party? Where am I not listening when someone's sharing with me a story and my consciousness is fragmented out into a different place and I'm listening just enough to stay in the conversation and respond with certain cues, but I'm actually not paying attention? Where am I not listening to the cyclic natures of my body and my own moon cycle and what it is that I'm releasing every single month? Where am I not listening when I'm tuning in with somebody's experience and their energetic field and tuning into my intuition that's telling me actually this is a red flag beyond appearance? Where am I not listening to my intuition that is every time I listen to it, it gets stronger, and why am I not honoring that? It took me into a wellspring of questions that I really started to unpack over a series of time. And what I actually learned over this past decade with my hearing journey is that the shamanic path is about listening beyond the ears, but it's with the entirety of your being and it's available to everybody. But we're so attached to our five senses that we don't give it enough credit to listen to our extrasensory perception. And what I've learned is empathy isn't just, oh, I feel your emotions. Empathy is I am inside your experience and I'm processing your emotions with you. That is actually the highest form of empathy. And so what my hearing loss, I would actually like to say hearing gain, what it actually did was energy is not created nor destroyed, it only changes in form. And so when I was no longer hearing, I was exponentially feeling emotions. It's not about the words. People say it's about the energy behind the words. We want to actually learn to listen to that. And so what it took me into was while I was on my own healing path, I started noticing that there was this gift that was moving through me and it didn't feel like me. But I was invited into spaces, thanking my previous teachers, that there was a healing mat. And in the healing mat, it was a space where they would place somebody that was going through it in the middle, and you would be invited, if you could, send your attention, intention of loving sphere into that person. And the power of collective attention, intention, I watched miracles happen. I watched people heal. I watched people access grief that they hadn't been able to access since they were 6 years old to genuinely actually heal through it. And what was happening was then I was called forward to actually start doing work on people. And when my heart was fully activated and I felt an immense amount of unconditional love for that person, could be a complete stranger, that was my green light to offer that love. And so what happened was I started to tap into a gift that was moving through me that had no logical sense. I was like realizing that if I pressed here and then blew over here, and it would create this electrical circuit that was happening in somebody's energetic field. Now, I didn't train in this, but yet there was a memory that was reactivated me that feels lifetimes deep. And so over years of learning to trust myself in these spaces, to learn to trust something beyond myself, and to create a very intentional prayer that allows what was moving through to be of only unconditional love, then I started watching miracles happen, and I started watching people genuinely heal. And instead of attaching myself to the logical aspect of what the heck am I doing, but actually allowing myself to receive the outcome, and the outcome was genuine healing, then the question, instead of being like, what am I doing? It was, who am I not to offer this? When the space and the invitation and the surrendering has presented itself, because 50% of it is me, but 50% of it is the receiver. The trust, the openness, the willing, the surrender, you went to the healing mat and your entire body just went and fully in the receiving. And that could also have been jet lag, but also like there was like a part of you. 50-50. Yeah. She dead, bro. Are we good? Are we good? She just come from Antarctica.
Too tired to fight healing.
Must surrender. Shamanic lady.
It is that and a practiced openness and a practiced willingness to surrender. Yeah.
It's it's 50%. Like that is so much of the healing. And I think that I don't know if I would say that I'm even doing the healing, but I would say that I'm reflecting back the beauty that you already are, so that you can heal yourself through rewriting the story, because rewriting the story around what is happening is the ultimate path to freedom. When you rewrite the narrative of who you actually are, recognizing just by being alive, you're inherently worthy. So there's clearly a story that has been picked up somewhere along the way that has proven otherwise, which is rooted deeply in an illusion. So if all I did was just sort of sit there and genuinely see the magnificence and the beauty of you without even saying a word or raising a finger, that's already enough. And that's what it means to hold space, I believe. It's not to sit there and be like, someone's going through a process and be like, hey, what the fuck is this woman doing? But smiling. That's not holding space. You're judging the shit out of someone. Like, it's actually counterproductive. But if I'm sitting there and you're going through an emotional purge or a process, and I'm just like, wow, this person is so beautiful, even in their sacred shit, even in their sacred crunchy, that's holding space. And that's available to everybody. And so I believe that my hearing game, I would like to call it, has gifted me the opportunity to listen more than most, even if I don't fully have my hearing. I'm at about 70% decreased in both my ears. And so even public spaces are really, I get a lot of social anxiety. If someone comes up and talks to me, even if I want to talk to them, I have like an experience of like social anxiety. But when I put myself in the right frame, where I'm in the shamanic space where there's no bullshit and there's no masks, I feel like I can breathe. I feel like the world's really noisy and there's a lot of projections and there was a lot of masks that are facading something much deeper. And I've been given a gift that's like a bullshit filter. And also in the same breath, being able to serve and just reflect the beauty that you are is one of the greatest gifts and makes everything make so much sense. And so it got to the point where I was in my hearing experience where at the beginning I just didn't know how to tap into the never-ending amount of grief that was available. That was just so much sadness around what was happening. But I've managed to get to a point where I've actually been on my knees and I've cried in gratitude for it, because it's given me access to a realm that I don't know if I would have had access to before, but it's bestowed within it a lifetime of wisdom and gifts that will continue to be the gift that keeps on giving. And this current situation or this conversation is one of the instances of it.
Hey, I'm taking a moment to share with you about one of my most powerful programs. This is the VITA coaching certification. It is a year-long professional training and how to have a tantric approach to sex, love, and relationships. It will not only transform your experience of sex, love, and relationships to the highest possibility for you in this lifetime, but will empower you with the keys, tools, and technology to be able to offer the same for your clients, because you will have such potent results that you can get for clients in an area that they most deeply desire. You will also be able to charge premium pricing for your coaching packages. We not only train you in VITA coaching on the art of coaching, but also extensive business training so that you can sell your coaching packages as well. If doing one of the most powerful, most transformative, most effective trainings around sex, love, and relationships is something that you are called for to professionalize your healing gifts and skills, head on over to LeilaMartin.com, sign up in the VITA coaching area to find out more about the program, or get on my email list anywhere on LeilaMartin.com, and we will let you know about the program, when it opens, how you can apply, and when you can join. So something that my heart really hears as you're sharing this story, that's something I like feel into a lot, I've considered a lot, is I feel sometimes in the Western world that we issue tradition and teachers, but almost from this egoic place of, I can go it alone. I don't want to play the cult leader or guru game. I can do it myself. And this idea that healing and spirituality is solo, right? Like you have to do it yourself. You have to meditate on your own. You have to save yourself. And while I think there is a truth to the fact that, well, people say you're born alone, but you're not actually alone. Mm-hmm. You're usually surrounded by midwives. You have God, goddess within you. You've got mama, right? Mm-hmm. Like, we're not born alone. We say you die alone, but hopefully none of us die alone. Mm-hmm. And you go back into source, right? So you're never really alone. We have this idea that you are. And I feel like we have this idea sometimes in the Western world, like we should be alone in our spirituality. And I actually think we're missing a huge piece, which is that spiritual growth can be relational. Mm-hmm. And that's what a spiritual teacher actually is. It's a relationship that you form to heal relationally, which is profound and beautiful. And that doesn't mean that you know, it's not necessary to do sometimes a meditation retreat and really be alone, right? But it doesn't mean that spirituality always has to be done alone. Mm-hmm. But what I think is that there's a balance, and I think a lot of people miss this, between having good teachers, connecting to lineages, right? Teachers accelerate your path. That's all they do. They can't do it for you, but they can accelerate the journey, right? They can inspire you to keep going. They can hold containers, right? It's hard to hold a container for yourself sometimes. We're meant to grow in community. We're meant to grow with containers and support and ritual around us and teachings. I also think that lineage things have been done a certain way for thousands of years for a reason sometimes, and that the practices are thought through, the guidance is thought through. It can be so important to connect to that. And I feel like when a lot of people think of being a healer, they think that you master certain tools and techniques that you learn, usually from other people, and you're there like doing these tools and techniques. And yes, then it makes you special, then it makes you powerful. What I love about your articulation that feels very true for me when I hold space, as what you're calling it, right? And I'd love to dive a little into like, what is shamanism? What does it mean to hold space? So when I'm showing up for someone, when I say hold space, I'm showing up for them in their highest process, whatever that looks like. So I'm not there for myself. I'm there for them. And in that, I'm not usually thinking about what I'm doing. I'm actually following the impulse of life. Now, I do that through the context of my own methodology, right? The VITA method, everything that I've developed, but also the traditions that I've studied. So it's like those traditions shape a container for me of certain tools or practices, certain understandings. But at the core, when I'm actually in that space, it's got qualities exactly like you share. I feel union with oneness, which is so beautiful. It's such a beautiful state to be in. I feel unconditional love most of the time for the person in front of me. And if something blips and either I feel my own process Or sometimes, me and a person get in enough of a journey together in a retreat or in a program or something like that, that's something of a story. And it's very rare that this happens anymore, but it used to happen when I was like a younger teacher on the path. A story can come up and I will know that's my work to do, right? That's always my work to do. It has nothing to do with them. But the unconditional love is the predominant experience. It's like it feels like the purest love of the creation of the universe is there, right? It's so beautiful. And from that space, it's like impulses. There's like an energetic knowing and an intuitive wisdom knowing of what is to be done, right? And that wisdom flows through the containers of teachings and lineages that I have learned, but it's listening to the impulse. And that impulse is available to all of us. It doesn't belong to any tradition. It doesn't belong to any teacher. It's actually a universal force, infinitely wise, infinitely powerful, and it can teach us as much, if not more, as any person, right? So people in lineages help shape, help give context, help give container, and I have incredible respect. But I think what people miss sometimes is how much the energy, right, which in one of my traditions, like the Tantric tradition, is Kundalini Ma, goddess consciousness. She actually teaches you. She is you. She works through you for your highest good and for everyone's highest good, right? So the healing space is really about opening up to that sacred impulse of life, right, which is working through us and in us to alchemize people and things into the highest alignment with life, right? So if that's health, you become healthy. And one of the things about alchemizing with life is life also involves death and illness and heartbreak and challenge and unworthiness and ancestral blocks and curses, right? So part of the healing journey is to put someone in the deepest energetic and sacred alignment and then trust, right? Trust what happens. And so the way that you talk about this healing, I love how much life force itself was a teacher to you, right? How much being in connection to divine energy was a teacher to you, because I think that's so important. And I also think that there's this additional challenge for so many of us, but those of us who are women, right? Because I didn't grow up with anyone looking like me with a pussy being a spiritual leader in my culture. Like, in fact, I was banned from the Catholic Church leadership, which was my childhood religion. So to give myself permission to be as spiritually wise as I am was a cultural nervous system leap. And I'm super privileged, and it was still fucking hard for me, right? And super protected in some ways, and it was still hard. So I just want to acknowledge that this journey of learning from life itself and allowing life itself is so profound. And your journey, it's so inspiring because your capacity is so deep and so beautiful. But one of the things I'd love everyone to take away from this conversation is, what does it look like to give yourself permission to be in your healing gifts, to be in your spiritual power, while doing what I always think is while doing what I always think is very essential, which is remaining humble, right? Like, I've apprenticed myself to teachers and schools and traditions for years, if not decades, depending on the tradition. And so it's both giving oneself that permission and power, and also humbly listening, right? And I feel you listen very deeply to heart, to love, to God, that you can find the humility in different ways. And the last little gem here is that usually when you tap into that oneness and that unconditional love in the space holding, it energizes you rather than exhausts you. Yeah. So I find that people who are in a lot of story when they're holding space get very tired from space holding. Whereas if you're in unconditional love, you're actually in divine union. It can be recharging. Doesn't mean that you don't need to like eat and sleep and rest afterwards, but it's actually like, wow, right? It's like being in your art, being in oneness, right? It's like a meditation. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, I find from those spaces that I've been both charged and also completely exhausted. I've had experiences where I've held space on the healing mat, and afterwards it feels like I've been hit by 100 bricks. Like I'm just like completely out. And I think that the difference is, for me, and the training around this has been the identification with the emotions that are presenting themselves.
Yes.
And really understanding what it means to be a hollow bone, which is to allow the emotions to flow through without attaching to them. And that is not just the shamanic space. That's not just the healing mat. That's also life in general. I used to also do body painting, and I would go to a festival, and I had to body paint so many people that I couldn't see the end of the line. And I had a circular mat, and I would be painting for hours, and I would be one after the next, after the next, after the next. And I didn't realize that at the time I was in like sort of like Jedi training of how to hold my own energy. So the first day I was exhausted. I was laying down. I was hurting in muscles that I didn't even know existed. And I was like, I cannot move. So the next day I made a new commitment, was that every single person that entered into the space, I would take a breath with them. I would make sure that my spine was straight, and I would invite them into my energy as opposed to them inviting me into theirs. Because if I'm taking on everybody else's energy, I'm for sure going to be exhausted by the next hour. So I learned actually before any of this started happening within the shamanic space, I started learning what it means to maintain my own energy, and then to invite people into my energy, and then be charged from the experience, actually be activated, uplifted, and inspired. So I left the second day feeling incredible, feeling charged by all of these majestic humans that I got to have the blessing of being in the presence of, and learn a lot about what it means to actually go in very like large populated spaces and to be charged by the end of it. And so I think that life has been my greatest muse and my greatest teacher. And I always trust that I'm in the right place at the right time. The most sacred thing being what is, and utilizing life as my ultimate muse, and realizing that I've always craved to have a teacher, somebody that was going to guide me and teach me in these spaces. But life has set me up separately. I've not had to, or like at this present moment, I haven't had a teacher yet. What I have is my greatest teacher is that my hearing got taken away. So that was the teacher for me. And everybody's going to have their own unique teacher. However, the most important thing that I emphasize is that I'm not any special or more elevated or have access to something that nobody else has. What actually the emphasis is I'm here to guide and show others that they too have it in their own unique fingerprint way. And so how to trust that for me has been, don't work on anyone, work on yourself. Like, what would it mean to actually place your hands before you go to bed at night and place your hands in a mudra over your stomach and to breathe with yourself for 5 breaths? Feel when you rub your hands together that actually the heat that comes from your hands is directly connected to your heart. And the more that you love, the more healing powers you have. So it's an exploration of, okay, well, what does it look like for me to actually start loving different aspects of myself? And what that looks like is realizing that the majority of life is made up of mundane moments. A crazy percentage of our life is the mundane, is the brushing our teeth, is the going to sleep alone, is the waking up and putting our makeup on, or whatever it is, whatever it looks like for you. But yes, we can go on Instagram and see the highlight reel of people's experiences, but life is not made up of champagne popping moments. It's made up of mundane experiences. So when we go down to the microcosm of the mundane experiences, how are we speaking ourselves in the in-between moments? This is actually the core of where self-love is born, is in the mundane in-between moments when no one's watching. How am I speaking to myself when I'm sitting in the mirror, I'm standing in the mirror and I'm doing my mascara? What is the voice that's going on inside of my head? And what would it look like to actually take back the steering wheel of the 60,000 thoughts on average we think a day, and to actually start refining them? Because the more loving I am towards myself, the more beautiful you become to me. It's actually got nothing to do with your level of beauty. It's the amount of beauty that I'm speaking to myself in the in-between moments. Now, this is available to everybody. So the more that we start to love ourselves in the mundane in-between moments, the more love we start feeling out of our heart, and the more beautiful other people become. So this becomes the foundational point of what it means to hold space, is to see the beauty in another, is to see the beauty beyond their physical appearance. Physical appearance, it doesn't really actually matter what flesh puppet you've incarnated into this life. The most magnetic and beautiful humans, from my perspective, is how much love they allow in and out of their heart. That's what makes someone beautiful. That's what makes someone attractive. I've come across the hottest guy on planet Earth, and he'll walk over to me. The second he opens his mouth and he's rooted in a place of narcissism, I'm like, It's just not beautiful anymore to me. And so the access to this is available to every single person. And that's what I always want to put emphasis on, is that your own unique magic and your own unique medicine is going to be yours, and like nobody else can do it. It's your unique fingerprint. Now, this is the piece that is very rampant in the spiritual community, is spiritual elitism. It's like, well, now I've tapped into this ability to articulate myself, or I've tapped into this ability to impact loads of people because I have 1 million followers on Instagram. And it creates this subconscious hierarchy system within our own psyche. It's a colonization mindset that can continue to perpetuate itself into the spiritual world when we tap into something. Now, here's the thing. The second that you think that it's about you is the second you shut off yourself from spirit, God, Allah, Buddha, Krishna, whatever you want to call it, the name behind the sun. This source, this information is available to everybody. And the second that we think it's about us, the second that I am now saying that I am better because I have access to, is the second you're actually cutting yourself off from the very source of it, that is the same thing that created the flower and the fruit and the hummingbird. What would it look like for you to be in co-creation with something much greater than yourself, and recognizing that the second that I think that it's about me, I become full of myself. And when you're full of yourself, you can't allow yourself to be the hollow bone to allow spirit to move through you. So it's actually shooting yourself in the foot when you think that you're better, more evolved, or got something that other people do and don't have. And when you can actually give yourself the gift of being humble, this is when your co-creation with something greater than yourself will continue.
Totally. And I feel like, it's such a classic game for the ego to play. So it's either superiority or inferiority, right? And either shame turned towards me, which becomes a kind of contempt towards self, or shame turned towards others, which becomes a contempt towards others. Mm-hmm. But one of the teachings that I love so much about this is Adyashanti, who's like one of my favorite meditation teachers, so incredible. I love sitting with him. And, he talks a lot about his spiritual superiority. And, he attained enlightenment, I think, when he was like 33 or something, and through the Zen tradition. And he was like, I realized that as long as I was spiritually arrogant, I wasn't all the way there. Mm-hmm. But I also realized that the more I tried to control my spiritual arrogance, the more it then became a battle with self. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like there's an art to watching the ego play its games, mm-hmm. and also realizing that like it's going to play its games, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. I haven't seen anyone on a spiritual path to this day who hasn't gone through a period of intense spiritual superiority or special or like snowflakeism, right? From just like, I remember myself like probably like 23, 24 years old, and I just like had wanted to be special my whole life, and I grew up in the suburbs and I wanted to get out and do magical things, and all of a sudden it was like, holy God, like Kundalini's inside of me, and I was like, I'm finally better than everyone else. I knew it. And so there's still, like, I'd be lying if I didn't say that it didn't still play out in me sometimes, right? And it's been an organic evolution to cracking myself open. But the antidote hasn't been to go to war with the part of me that thinks I'm better than everyone else. Because I also got raised in a family that like because of their pain and unworthiness, they have contempt towards others, right? It's a way of dealing with pain. It's a way of dealing with shame. It's a way of dealing with unworthiness, contempt towards others, or contempt towards oneself. And in that, it's like I've had to ask myself, okay, where am I in pain? And the antidote has been cracking my heart open. That like deep humanness of seeing the universality of my experience with everyone else, because it doesn't matter what kind of snowflake I ended up being. Like, I cry the same tears as everyone else. I have the same heartbreak as everyone else. I have the same hopes that everyone else has, which is to live a good life and be proud on my deathbed and be loved and have my desires fulfilled and to have done things that I'm proud of in this lifetime, And I fucking fail and I don't live up to my expectations and I play crazy games inside of myself. And just knowing that everyone does that actually cracks my heart open. And has helped me play less of the superiority game, because I also find that one of the reasons we flip to the superiority game is most of us play the inferiority game for a really long time. We feel inferior. We feel inferior to people like you and me who grabbed the microphone and did the healing and what is, and we're like, oh, I could never do that in this lifetime, So then once we actually find our power, it's like it flips and you're like, aha. And so I just want to acknowledge that part of the path for people so that we can have tenderness when it happens and some level of awareness, if we can, of it passing through us. So at some point, it's like maybe the heart will crack open and we can graduate out of that game, or at least see the ego running around playing it, because it's not the game of the self with the capital S, but it's like this perpetual game of the self with the little s. And one of the, one reason I've actually come to really respect the Buddhist tradition a lot more in recent years is because it's a tradition that really studies this game of the ego, and especially in relationship to spirituality, right? So it's like our ego wants to grab story. And our ego wants to grab meaning, and our ego wants to grab outcome. And so watching it, the perpetual nature in which it grabs and grabs and grabs and grabs. And one really powerful teaching I received from this woman who gave me healing sessions when I did the darkness retreat that you so lovingly invited me into up in Oregon. And I was really truly seeing the depth to which so much of what I do that looks like love is just still my ego functioning, trying to get something. And that so many of us, what we think is love is still this like very deep dimension of our ego. And it was so enlightening, like literally enlightening to see the degree of that functioning. Like I was simultaneously horrified and like broken open with just like the helplessness of it all. And I asked the woman who was giving me the sessions, because she knew, most people when I told them about this, they were like, no, like loving behavior is loving behavior. But actually there's a difference between loving behavior that's done purely because it's true and loving behavior that's done for some outcome. And I have seen in my own self, and I see it in the world at large, that even most of the loving behavior is still done with some outcome in mind. And so when I said to her, I was like, how do you know if you're in the ego or if you're in the true heart? And she said, I just assume I'm always in the ego. And that level of spiritual humility was like it broke me open of some sort of spiritual addiction to feeling like I was always the most spiritual, or I always was the most loving, or I always was this, or I was that. And I was like, yeah, like there's a respect now for how much it takes to live truth rather than outcome. Mm-hmm. And I think the most powerful sessions come from truth, and that identification with someone's emotions to a degree that it exhausts us comes when we lose alignment and think they shouldn't be feeling that thing, or it's tragic that they're feeling that thing, or they should be healed, versus being so in the oneness of the moment that it's like, of course, of course we're all going to suffer. Of course we're all going to be in pain. Of course we're all going to go through challenges. What human, like show me a human who doesn't? Mm-hmm. And so that to me has like eviscerated some of this sense, like we need to change or fix or heal, more to we want to come into greater alignment with wholeness, greater alignment with truth, greater alignment with life, and then trust whatever comes from that. And you blew me open actually almost exactly 1 year ago. We referenced this when we came in. You came to Burning Man, and you'd been through what felt like quite an intense breakup. And you seemed reasonably good out there on the playa. Like, I mean, I know you went through it, but you were looking hot. You were doing your thing. You were swamping with me and Mama Gina in like our 100-degree tent. Like we were like out there doing it. And I saw you at one of the dinners, and I was like, how are you doing so well? And you looked at me and you said, I trust life. And it was so deep. It was so real. I was like, God damn, bitch. Like, I actually, the actual thought I had was I was like, I don't trust life that much. And then quickly followed by, I want to learn how to trust life that much. And that has been one of my paths this year, inspired by you, is how can I trust life that much in love that even at the depths of a heartbreak or breakup, I could be that in trust of life. So tell us, Blue, how does one learn to trust life?
Well, first and foremost, there's times where I don't trust life. I'm like, what is even happening? I feel like I'm going to vomit and shit all at the same time. I'm like, what is even going on? I don't even know. First and foremost, just got to breathe that into the space. I do trust life. I do implicitly, in the core of my being. We'll go into, I guess, how I develop that. And there are times where I'm like, okay, big man on a cloud, what the heck is happening? Because I don't even know what's going on. I don't even know where up and down is. I've lost my joy. I've lost my play. I feel depressed. I'm trying to make it to the fridge from my bed, and I'm already on the floor in a puddle of my own snot and tears. I feel like I'm in my golem phase, and I'm like, how could anybody love me? I'm hideous. And I disappear into my cave for months on end. The hermit archetype, I got that one on lock. There are times when I do not trust life. I'm at a banquet at Burning Man. I've probably got some cool Jedi outfit on, and I'm sitting there, and you turn to me while I'm eating some bomb ass food, and you're like, "Hey, Blue, how you doing?" I'm like, "Yeah, I trust life because I've got my mouth full of some A-grade food, and I'm surrounding myself with dope humans. Yeah, I got trust life in that moment."
I caught you in a good moment.
You caught me in a great moment. I'll tell you what else I did at Burning Man at that time. I watched the sun go down. I wept so hard that I looked like some crazy woman that had lost it while I offered every single part of my grief to the sun. I was like, ugh, and that part I believed in, and that story that I attached myself, and that dream of us being married and having children, I'll offer that to the sun as well. There's a trust, and simultaneously there is a death that has to happen of the shamanic cycle of just being alive, which is death, purification, rebirth, integration. We keep going through these cycles. And when death shows up and starts knocking on my door, Persephone, the goddess of the underworld, I let her take me. And I respect the shadow. I respect the times when I'm brought to my knees and I don't even know where up is anymore. It kind of feels like a whitewash moment where the waves are hitting and I'm like, oh, bah! And I'm already looking out to my friend. I'm like, hey, how you doing? Bah! And I'm down. I'm under the wave. Then I'm like, ugh! And I come up, and then here comes another wave and it hits me down. I'm tumbling and turning under the water. I don't even know where up is anymore. I'm about to hit a rock. It slices my leg. I'm like, oh, could it not get any worse? I finally come up for some air. Whoopah! Back down again. I'm in it. I'm tumbling. I then finally get washed up on the shore, and I've already lost my bikini bottoms. Now I'm naked in front of everybody with my butt out, sand in my crack, and I'm really challenged. This is also life. Okay, so there, definitely from that heartbreak, I got ripped open. It was painful from many different angles. Core wounds were touched, wound of abandonment, wound of rejection, wound of unworthiness, the wound of isolation, but also not wanting anybody around and being caught up in that, don't see me, but I'm also sad and lonely. Those two have been very present in my life, and there is this piece where I kind of have a very old medicine woman in my psyche that she kind of sits there while I'm laying in front of my altar crying and what the heck, and listening to the same sad song on repeat because part of my psyche actually likes the sadness as well. And so I'm listening to the music and the old medicine woman going, hey, yeah. And she's smiling at me. She's like, good work, baby. You know this is for you. You know you're going to pack a punch when you talk about this on the other side because you got medicine that's embodied. Hey, yeah. And so I'm clocking her, and I'm okay. And my human is just double fingers up to the sky. And it's how could this possibly happening? And not understanding the why and wondering where the justice is when I feel like I've been pure in my intentions, and how could this possibly happen to me? And so it's
something like that moment in the universe. You're like, I'm a good person.
Yeah.
Do you understand? Yeah. I've done kind things in my life.
Exactly. I'm come on. I was nice. I was loving. I said lovely words. I painted him a fucking painting.
How many people have I helped?
Exactly.
Do I get no good karma for that?
Exactly. And for all of you listening to this on audio, I'm sorry if your eardrums have sort of blown out a little bit, but can you feel the passion? right? Can you feel the depth of the heartbreak that we're all going to go through just by being human?
And there's a fun archetype of the divine, right? Because you named one, which was like you father on white clouds in the sky. We all know where that one comes from. But I love playing with the multifaceted divine, which I think the Hindu tradition is excellent at, right? Like there's all these different faces of the goddess, all these different faces of the gods. And one of them, there's two actually that I know you and I have both tussled with, that everyone tussles with. And I see her as like the goddess Dom. And she's got like steel-toed like stilettos with like steel stiletto heel piece. And she just like is pressing the like stiletto steel heel like right into the center of my heart as I scream, you know? And she's like looking for my surrender. Yeah. And I'm just fighting and fighting. And then I'm a bratty sub and then I'm pissed. And like sometimes I get into the orgasm of it. Sometimes I'm in the fuck you of it. And like she doesn't let go until I stop fighting. Yeah. And then there's this other part, I actually feel this one as more masculine, which is like, you know, God's like, oh, you say you trust life? And it's like one of those fire pokers that comes out where it's all like lit and hard. And it's like, how about here? And you're like, ah!
Yeah, she brands you.
How about here? Ah!
Brands you with the word trust on your back.
Just like keeps stabbing you wherever it hurts. And you're like, no, I trust. And I think this is really important because a lot of us are socialized to love God, right? And I'm saying God, but you could say universe, you could say life, you could say, and like, yes, this, like all of this is part of the one great formless consciousness that creates all of us, right? That is all of us. And yet the multifaceted infinity of the 10,000 things dances with us. Yeah. And one of the pieces of devotion, right? I don't know how it is on the shamanic path, but in the Tantric tradition, in the high priestess tradition, it's like, can I find devotion here? And I find because of our socializing around religion a lot of the time, it's like I can only find devotion where it's pure, where I'm getting everything that I want, where things feel like they're going well, versus can I find devotion when I'm getting like the steel-toed version of like the stiletto-booted goddess, or like, you know, I'm getting like poked in my deepest wound. Like people use the word love a lot. Like, can I find love there? And for me, devotion and love are interchangeable. Or to me, devotion is love with the seeing of the wisdom and the brilliance in it. It's like I love and I see the wisdom and the brilliance of this. So it's like an awe. I guess love and awe combined together. It's like devotion, something like that. So I love having us articulate this because I've thought about this often. We're both women who channel higher wisdom with an uncanny stream, right? And an uncanny ability. And that in the Tantric tradition it's a Saraswati gift. It's Kundalini Ma, having reached the higher chakras, unlocks an ability to channel, right? And there's probably a teaching of it in many different traditions. So you kind of referenced it, this ability to speak, right? It's a gift. It's a spiritual gift, actually, that happens when Kundalini awakens in certain channels and then certain chakras. And we thrash around in bed or compare text messages from men. Or like we both sat in the kitchen before being like, oh, Lord, why didn't I listen to that red flag? Yeah. How do I have so much fucking wisdom in this body? And I was like, I don't see that. I don't see that red flag. We're just going to keep dating.
Well, red flag. Kids. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. You're screaming at your bitch. No, it's just fine. Fine. All right. Let's just take it for another 6 months so you get completely demolished by this ignoring of the red flag. Beautiful. But on the other side of it, when the red flag presents itself, you will now know. You will now know. I'm like, hell no. You saying all them right thing. You look handsome as fuck. Like it's beautiful, but I can sense it because I've done this before and I'm not doing it today. Not today, Satan. We're not going round in another loop on this one.
We had this great moment because you like came to me so humbly and you were like, Layla, like how? Like how could this have happened?
How did this happen?
And I was like, I dated this man once, and like when I started dating him, like 3 people called me, and like I'm gonna like distort the specifics of the story so like no one can recognize it, but basically it was like he like did this horrific thing while his like ex-girlfriend was like screaming and naked, like in this very vulnerable state. that like no one would ever do. And at the time, because I like so badly wanted to date him, I was like, he must have had a good reason. And like, it was like, you couldn't have whacked me harder with a red flag. Like you couldn't, it was just like 1, 2, 3, bam! Right? And I like got like slammed against the wall. And I was like, that didn't hurt, right?
Like, universe, give me a sign. Like, smacked you in the face, like, not that one.
And I was like, fuck my life, right? And then later I was like, Layla, could you ever in a million years imagine yourself doing that to someone? I was like, no. I was like, not under any circumstances. So nobody has a reason to behave that way. But it's also so humanizing. I've been thinking about you that we are these women of like wisdom and love and partnership. And I respect so deeply how you've conducted partnership, how loving you are, how rich your partnerships have been. Actually, really am proud of a lot of the partnerships that I've had. And also, like, we tumble in the same dating cycles, underworld journeys, lessons as anyone else, you know? Just like ignored a red flag and wasted a couple, whatever, months of my life. Some people waste years, right? You pay for that. And we're just as human even with that level of wisdom. And I think that's part of the humanizing of it, right?
Yeah, also I realized, like, stronger the woman, stronger the draw for the narcissist. It just is. It's just a fact.
You want to know if you're a real strong woman? How many narcissists have you
dated?
Well,
all right, then. I'm a strong lady. Let's go.
Let's have some sex magic. The ice has melted.
Oh, yeah, sex magic on the rocks, baby. It's melted because there's a lot of heat. Do you see this?
Yeah. Let's get our handsome videographer, Jameson, to get us some new ice.
It's like a little fan.
It's like, this is the first day we've used the studio.
I miss you guys. You're on my podcast.
Right? I know. I miss the tree. It's not the same without that tree in my life.
I know. The tree's magic.
It's so magic. It's so magic.
Oh, hi, Snow. Well, so cute.
I love it. It's like she has like a summer mullet cut. It looks like she's like ready to drink like dog Bud Light, you know?
She came out and she was like, everything was short and besides her ears. It was really long. And I was like, this is an interesting haircut.
The dethroned beer of the summer.
Yeah.
I knew something about myself when they were like, Bud Light is no longer the #1 beer in America. It is now. And I was like, I don't even know what that beer is. It's like, that's how out of touch I am.
Well, how to in touch? You know,
it's like a Mexican, yeah. Or like, yeah, totally like in touch in this way.
Yeah. Out of touch with what's going on, which is actually probably a good idea. Yeah. That's where the sages come from.
Jameson, thank you. All right. We're going to take some sex magic. Oh, do we have the other one? We don't have to open a new package. Or did she? Oh, right.
Right next to it.
Woo! All right. So Blue was actually here with me the whole time that I made Mood. She saw like the very first design mock-ups.
Remember, I was thinking about it earlier. Remember when we did the toast? And it was all of like your like homies, and we just had a moment of just saying a prayer because it was the day that it launched, and like witnessing you and the birthing pains and the challenges and the beauty and the learning yourself and meeting yourself over and over and over again through creating this.
We can cut this part out if you want, but the time that you wanted to learn more about being a lesbian,
but more about being what?
More about being a lesbian and pussy pleasure.
Oh,
and me and Liz were like, we'll show you. Like, Liz can give me a pussy massage and you can learn about female pleasure. And we all had sex magic. And literally, our housemate Liz massaged my pussy and gave step-by-step instructions while you kindly looked on.
I watched, and I actually brought snacks.
Yeah,
I disappeared for a moment, and I was like, where did Blue go? And I came back with snacks. And Liz looked over at me and was like, heard the crunching, and she's like, are you eating right now? And I was like, yeah, it helps me learn. Like, I remember more information when I'm eating. So like, give me a moment, please.
The brain runs on glucose.
Yeah, I remembered the information, so it clearly works. Success is what works, right?
Want a lesson in pussy?
Yeah, what happened when I lived at the Queenum was definitely like, I still am integrating this. Like, it seems so normal after a while, you know? It's like, kind of reminds me, like, if you're having a massage and someone's like massaging your muscles and like warming you up, and then like just like randomly will like spike your ass, like all of a sudden, because you're so warmed up, it seems to be part of the massage, but like out of context, it's like, what the heck are you doing?
Let's be clear, everything that happened in the Queen was highly consensual.
I wasn't the one that mentioned it, P.S. I didn't bring it up. This wasn't me bringing it up.
No. Just in your example, that it wasn't like things became unconsensual at the Queendom and we normalized it. You're more saying that like we lived these outrageously, like we did pretty outrageous things and it became normal, but it was always consensual.
Yeah, 100% consensual. There was definitely no unconsensual things happening, but it seemed so normal in the bubble, right? Like it was just normal. And then when I left the bubble, it was like, oh, that's not what most people do on a regular basis. Got it. Cool.
We were like, let's teach Blue to be more gay.
I remember when I first moved in, I remember someone said, I can't remember who it was like, by the time you leave here, you're going to be a lesbian. And I was like, what? I could not relate at all to what they had said. By the time I left, I was like, yeah, that's probably right. I'm not fully lesbian, by the way, but I'm also not like completely ridiculed by shame anymore. So that's always a great thing.
Yay! I know. I was like leaving my retreat in Costa Rica, or like I was in the hallway, and one of my VITA graduates like stopped me in the hallway. She was Indian, and she was like, I really was afraid of what might happen. She was like, and I just called my boyfriend, and I said with so much excitement and pride, I was like, Layla Martin makes us all more gay, and like. I meant it from the bottom of my soul. I was like, I can die now. And I used to be afraid of that because of my own internalized homophobia. Like when I first came out as bisexual and I was like, everyone's going to feel unsafe with me. And then just, maybe I'm making people more. And I'm like, if you wrote she made the world more gay on my gravestone, I would die so proud,
Yeah.
Like, yes.
Yeah, it's the new MAGA hat. It just says, make the world more gay. Layla, we need to get you one of those. If anyone's listening to this and they're just like all about sending Layla gifts, like go ahead and send her one of those hats, custom made. I think that she'll rock it.
Witchier, gayer, more alive, more spiritual in a celebratory way.
My mum messaged me the other day and because I wrote on my Instagram story, she's like, just hanging out with me and my wives, like a term, like because I live with women. Yeah. And she just messaged me and she said, is there something that you need to tell me?
Well, the funny thing is at the Queendom, for like the first year, we did some wild, we did some stuff, but it didn't feel like, whatever. We hosted a few parties. It could be a little sexy sometimes, but it didn't feel like we actually did what everyone would have dreamed that like we would have been doing. And then towards the end of it, when, we were doing like pussy massage and sacred like hoe activations on the fucking striptease pole. And
hoe being heaven on earth, by the way.
Yeah.
I give her 2 winks. If you're listening to this, you didn't see it. I winked at her twice.
I was like, thank God we didn't let people down before we wrapped this up. Yeah. Thank God Blue learned to be more gay while eating snacks.
Yeah, snacks, babe. Seriously, if you ever want to learn anything, just make sure that you got yourself a handful of snacks and you will download that information.
Well, we used to have a thing at play parties in our community where like literally like towards the end of the night, right? Like beginning of the night, don't do this if you're ever at a play party because it like, leaks the energy. But let's say past like 2 or 3, when you've like fed the energy, you've done your thing, we would get snacks and sit on the couch together, like literally eating popcorn, watermelon, whatever, and watching people who were still in their highest bliss, like get it. Well, it was like, this is so much better than Netflix. This is like...
Definitely. Here's the thing, right? I'd never been to a play party before I met Layla Martin. And even the one that I did go to, I just laid on the floor in the middle of the room with my dog in between my legs. And anytime someone came close to me, she would growl at them. And it was actually like perfect because I was deeply uncomfortable during certain moments because I didn't know what to do with myself. So I was like, okay, just plank in the middle of the room and just have the dog lay on you. And anybody that comes close, growl. But you're still in the play party and you're still involved in what's going on. And so I just lay there there. And then somebody came over who's Nadia, who's like our roomie and a really close friend of mine. She's like, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I'm good. She goes, is there any way like I can support you? She's like, maybe you could tickle me with a feather so it like feels like I'm really doing something. So she just lay there and stroked me with a feather while I was like witnessing this sea of experience around me. And I was like, okay, first play party successful. When I felt like moments where I didn't really know what to do with myself, I actually caught myself doing this. I went down because I was living downstairs. I left the play party, went down to my room and just periodically ate cake. I literally would sit in my room on my own eating cake as like some sort of buffer defense mechanism for my awkwardness. And then there was a moment of like, okay, you can do this. You can bring it back yourself back to the party. And I would like eat the cake and then I would like take a deep breath and then I'd go back to the gathering. Now listen, context, right? I was raised Christian. I went to a boarding school. There was a rule. There was like a 30 centimeter rule that if I was 30 centimeters close to anybody of the opposite sex, you would get punished. So like my programming, right, like is deep inside of my being, and there's not anything that I put myself in that's pushed beyond that shame barrier that has been created. So for me to then put myself in that environment, of course, there's all these defense mechanisms that go, must eat cake. Cake is going to be the thing that's going to save me in this moment. And at the same breath, every single minute I spent in that space, shame from my past transmuted out of my body. And that is the thing that I'm still integrating now, is that I'm starting to learn to live shame-free and allowing intimacy to be born for that which is needed in every given moment, as opposed to being a certain way of being like, I am a straight woman and this is how I interact in intimacy and anything outside of this is not okay. Well, that's also rigidity, and like that sits in the cells of my being. And so what you gifted me was the liberation of my own shame. And now where I'm going to find myself to rest on the pendulum is based from choice, not based from programming.
Fuck yes. That's it. This episode is sponsored by my program, Obliss. What that means is that I have the joy of sharing this podcast with you because some of you will go on to join my programs. So Obliss, I have been teaching for 10 years. What does it do for you? It gives you a space to activate your highest pleasure, to fall in love with your body as a temple and experience the energetic magic and eros that is in you. How do I know it's in you? Because it is in every single woman and people of all genders that I have worked with. When they do these practices, they activate something inside of themselves that they never thought possible. Obliss trains you to have the ultimate orgasm. It's like you get the ultimate orgasm, but the kind of side effect is how deeply you fall in love with yourself. So the results that people get from this program are absolutely life-changing. It trains you to heal your sexuality, to address old wounding, to be able to face things like fear, guilt, shame, and shutdown, be able to love and heal yourself back into your magnetic radiance so you can have the best sex, the most incredible relationships that you were born to have. So Obliss, you can actually sign up today. So you can head over to laylamartin.com/Obliss. That's laylamartin.com/Obliss. You can also find that link down below to find out all the details of the program and to hop into this incredible life-changing program that will give you a deep dive, but also a gentle introduction to the practices of Tantra and sacred sexuality that you can carry with you for the rest of your life.
And, you know, I've never really talked super publicly about like play experiences. I mean, I did a little bit on Aubrey Marcus's podcast. It's funny. I was like, I'm not going to talk about the play experiences. I'm not going to talk about the play experiences. And Aubrey like looks at me point blank and he's like, so what about the community play experiences? And I was like, we're here to tell the truth. We're here to tell the truth. This is like a few years ago, actually. And I do want to clarify for everyone, because when someone says play parties, right, it's like a sex party, basically where sexuality to me is welcomed and embraced as part of the party experience. And the reason I want to clarify it is because I think when I say sex party or play party, right, I'm going to say play party from now on, people go to what I experienced. Like when I moved to New York City, I'd never been to a play party before. Actually, I went to one play party when I was about 19. My 31-year-old roommate in San Francisco was like, I didn't want to be a Virgo. I was like pissed off about being a Virgo because we're like all like anal retentive and serious.
Yeah, and also you built like epic businesses. Thank you, being a Virgo.
I'm also messy as fuck. So I was like...
You know, every gift has a challenge.
I don't know what time it is to save my life, right? Like, you've lived with me, you know. Like Blue like texted me, she's like, I'm gonna be late to the podcast. I was like, we on Layla time, you know, like
I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm going to be late. I was training in the military. I was in the Air Force. If I was a second late, the entire platoon was fucked. And so it was like, there's so much pressure on me of like being late. I'm like, Layla, I'm in traffic. It took me an hour to get here. She's like, we're on Layla time, which is
I was like, we were probably going to start 20 minutes late anyways. So
we're good.
Oh, we're so good. I was like, take your time. They both have their benefits. Anyways, I was like not into being a Virgo. And my 31-year-old roommate was like, come to a play party and the vast majority of people will be Virgos because they're like these secret, like sexy, like erotic creatures who have enough, like people respect them enough to give them positions of power, but they're like these like crazy, kinky weirdos deep down inside. I was like, I could maybe get down with that sign. Like I could maybe that's why I was born a Virgo. I don't know. People who know me in business now are like, oh yeah, you're a Virgo. But like if you know me in relationship to like washing the dishes, like there ain't no Virgo in me. I have to work really hard to not look like a fucking mess in the way that I dress. like some people, it's like so second nature for me. Anyway, so I went to the first play party. She like brought me to people and I was all scared and I was like, what's your astrological sign? And like there were a lot of Virgos and then I ran away. I was not ready. I was not ready for that opening. And then when I moved to New York with Andrew, I felt the most at home at sex parties because I had been living in the jungle where people were so free and we would do tantric rituals and practices and I was starved for people feeling more liberated. And in New York, I think maybe I made out with a woman once and like went down on her. But the whole time in New York City, I never hooked up with anyone. I barely even hooked up with Andrew at play parties because those parties didn't speak to my soul. But I felt at home where people were more shameless about their sexuality. And those sex parties, I would say, were a little bit more like people were drinking, they were doing drugs. There was like, it was for me hard to watch sex that looked disconnected and pornographic in the sense, not the sense that like I love wild sex. I love like all kinds of like intense things. I love exploring boundaries. I love power play. I love BDSM. I love it all. But when I say pornographic, I mean it looked like women were doing it for men's gratification and it looked disconnected. It looked hollow. It didn't look like it came from the heart. And I didn't like that. That never spoke to me. So I think when I say sex party, for a lot of people listening and for a lot of women, you might imagine that kind of sex party, that's what's happening. That A, never spoke to me. B, for me personally, and I don't say this to shame anyone, I would be totally shameless, I realized never slept with a man at a play party other than my partner, right? If I was in partnership at the time, yes, I would make love with my partner sometimes. Because for me, a play party has never been about hooking up with a stranger, but that can be part of the nourishment for some people, a new experience, a novel experience, right? For me, and I feel like this comes from my high priestess lineage, I want people to remember Eros and hedonistic celebration as a path to God, because it is. That you can find yourself in your erotic expression when it's safe, when it's fun, when it's playful, in a way that brings you home to yourself, that in a way that brings you home to the divine. And I believe that we were meant to express our sexuality a bit more communally and a bit more in play and a bit more wildly than we have been socialized to do. That this extreme, so much shame around masturbating, so much like, oh, I just, like if someone saw me having sex, I'd be horrified. There's this cracking open where it's like, we love dancing with loads of other people. You don't want to dance with every person on the dance floor. You can dance at home alone in your room, and yet there's something beautiful about dancing with other people. There's an energy, there's a vibe, there's something that cracks open. And so for me, like a play experience is kind of like being on a dance floor with your Eros. It's a play field. And so for me, it was much more getting back to ancient ecstatic rites of the goddess, where we worshipped through the beauty and exploration and power of our Eros. And that's not to say that for anyone else, it can't be about fucking strangers or having wild experience, like pushing the envelope as far as you can, because some of my friends, like that's what a play experience is for them. They love that. For me, it was more like, let's taste ecstasy. And that might be sitting in yab yum and making out, or that might be a pussy massage, or that might be having a really consensual, beautiful threesome that's like life-changing. And so it's like there's not another word for it, but I wish there was, because those experiences don't look like most play parties or most sex parties. And the intention for me behind them, actually, I never wanted to throw them because I didn't want to be associated with them, but I surrendered. Like life asked me to do it. And I had to get over my egoic fear that people would think like, oh, Layla Martin blah, 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 does X, Y, and Z. Just be like, people can think what they want. I serve the goddess, and the goddess wants these ecstatic rites and rituals of erotic power and freedom. So I will do it. I will show up for it. And it's been so beautiful. It honestly feels like part of what the ancient high priestesses were doing, holding these like sacred spaces for divine erotic expression.
Yeah, it feels like a really honoring description of what it is that's being created through you specifically. Yeah. There's the intention, there's really clear guidelines, there is a ceremony space open and closed, there is an honoring of everybody involved, there is a consensual nature that is genuinely heart-centered and heart-based. And so I just knew, like, I wasn't going to enter into this space, period.
Yeah. Like,
that was just the experience. I was like, it's just not for me. And it wasn't until living in the home with you and living with the home, the other sisters, and like recognizing, like, in a space where usually I'm the most liberated, I was the most unliberated in his house. And I was like, wait, hold on, what's going on here? I feel so much contraction. Like, I was like, oh my goodness, I'm gonna like cry at this space, because I'm realizing and I'm confronting how prisoned I am by stories that have been placed on me around my relationship with Eros, my sexuality, and my sensuality. As a young woman that was very developed, like, I had large breasts at a very young age, I was sexualized before I was even ready. I wasn't ready to be like focused on my breast as a 13-year-old girl. And so I hid. And so my default was, it's safe for me to be goofy and silly, but it's not safe for me to be sexy. If I'm sexy, then I'm going to attract unwanted energy. I'm going to attract situations that is going to be my fault. And so the default was goofy and silly. And that was the way that I would become friends with the person and create an intimacy, but it wasn't an intimacy through my sexuality as a developed woman or developed young girl at a young age. And what I realized is you tell a story for that long.
Yeah.
And then when you are actually around genuinely liberated individuals, it just shone a light on where I was actually trapped. And that's actually something that I'm always so curious about in my life, whether it's within my psyche, whether it's in looping beliefs of unworthiness, whether it is in my appearance or body dysmorphia when I look in the mirror, or whether it's in my sexuality. I'm always curious to see where I'm still not free.
Yeah.
And what living with you and the other epic women was to highlight where I still wasn't free and where I was bound by a right and wrong narrative or a binary experience in my own psyche, where I was keeping myself locked in a judgmental ping pong match with myself. And so when I knew that it was a safe place, when I knew that it was intentional, when I had watched you guys walk the walk while living with you and the way that you related to your Eros and the way you related to your sensuality, then what it did was allowed me to actually meet it from a new lens and a new place where I'm actually safe, where I can actually go into the space, and even if I'm uncomfortable, can lay in the middle and know that I'm completely safe and place myself in that position to actually see from the inside out. It's really not that scary. From the outside in, and like all these stories, and I'm like, oh my goodness, it's so scary. What the heck are they doing? They must be swinging from the ceiling and doing all these crazy things and these contraptions, and what is going on? Well, actually, when I was in the center of it and I could feel the energy, going back to our original part of the start of this podcast, which is to listen, I could actually place myself in these spaces and listen and hear that it was coming from the heart. And it was hear that it came from an equality. It came from a reverence and a respect. It came from women that were setting the container, not men. And not saying that there's anything wrong with men setting the space, but from my experience, being the only experience of being where it's women-led, I felt that it was heart-centered and an honoring of women and allowing women to open up into their priestess and their Shakti and their power, and then allowing men to meet them in that Eros. And so it was a very powerful experience for me. And I left with a curiosity. I left with an excitement. I left with a deeper sense of self, a deeper level of intimacy with my own eros, and simultaneously a transmutation of shame that allowed for a little bit more life force energy to flow through my body. So it's ultimately such a gift.
I think that's got to be some sort of phrase too. Like, I think it's time to eat cake. That was the phrase that you had, because I know that's it's time to eat cake when you were going downstairs. There's a very specific. I'm actually not an emotional eater. I'm the opposite. I usually like fast when I'm upset, but there's a very specific feeling when my trauma or shame or like epic grief starts pushing from my unconscious to my conscious. And I'm like, there's a feeling of like, I'm a little bit more savory. So it's like must eat sweet potato.
I wish mine was must eat sweet potato. I'd be having a much easier experience with my workout routine. I'm like, must eat cake at any time I feel uncomfortable. It's like, oh, you're going on a real rocky path, sweetheart.
All right. I feel like a little high from the sex magic. This is great. All right, a few let's do a little rapid fire round just to wrap it up. So if someone is like, I know I have those healing gifts.
If you know how to what?
Like I have those healing gifts. Like when I hear Blue talk, when I hear Layla talk, I feel like a resonance, right? I want to know that in myself. What's like a good first step? Where do people go to learn the healing arts?
Great question. First and foremost,
I keep sucking the spoon. Actually, I keep drinking the spoon, and it's like the actual like sensual experience of it it's quite amazing. I've never sucked a spoon quite like this before. Anyways, carry on to talk about healing.
Keep the eros alive, sweetheart, even while you drink your drink. One of the greatest questions or declarations that I believe you can ever make is in prayer to ask or call in, please use me to be of service to the greatest good of the whole. Like it's an ask. It's like I'm actually recognizing that there's something greater than myself first and foremost. And secondly, I'm saying I actually would like to be used of service to the greatest good of genuine healing on the planet. Because when we actually start creating more healing than we're creating more trauma on the planet, we are making a step in the collective consciousness of the healing. So when we can actually start to recognize with my life, with my path, with my word, with my action, with my deed, I'm going to actually start to be of service to that which is needed and to open a co-creation with something greater, then that is one of the most powerful things you could ever ask. And if you ask it every single day in a consistency, you're really showing up for like you actually mean it. So today, please allow me to be of service to the greatest good of all beings I come into contact with, to all beings of all sentient life, as well as specifically myself, so that it can overflow to others. Now, it's not going to look like for everybody the shamanic realm. It's not going to look like hands-on healing. It could look like putting pure love into a dish that you've made from scratch and feeding the people that you care about. That's also what service could look like. So it's not one size fits all, but there is a recognition that there is something greater that is moving through us, as us, and for us. And it's the same thing that created this entire planet. If you don't believe in God or spirit or creator, go look at the stars. We're floating on a massive rock hurling through space at millions of miles an hour, held into orbit by a giant ball of fire while rotating on an axis. Don't tell me magic isn't real. I don't believe it. Look at the stars. We are in a very profound experience that actually I don't know what the truth is. I get as close as what I can feel that the truth vibrates in my body as I can possibly be. And there was one of my teachers that once said to me, I don't know what the truth is, but I know what love feels like, and I follow that every single day. And so if we can start to say, please use me for greatest good for the service of the whole, and allow me to align with that which is the closest thing to love and truth that I can possibly get to and serve from that place, watch beauty unfold in your own unique life. But I'm excited to see your own unique expression, because that's actually what the world needs, is your authenticity. And this authenticity is connected to your magnetism, and your magnetism will attract to you that which is here for your dharma, so that you can lay on your deathbed at the end of your life and go, I went all in. I served from the best of my capacity. I've lived to blow my own mind, and the only person I wanted to impress was my 5-year-old self every single day. And that was enough.
the universe is like, let's make magic. And you're like, let's fucking go.
Let's fucking go.
And there is something really powerful. I've always found that in my spiritual path, because I had to carve a spiritual path that was not clear, right? It wasn't like, I was like, I think I'm a Tantric sex witch. And they were like, 400 Tantric sex witches to train me. I was like, I think I'm a Tantric sex witch. I don't know what the fuck the next step is, but I'm going to pray, right? And so I was like, all right, I want to learn Tantra. And I would hold that as an intention, and I would ask people, and I would, and then I would get called to where I was supposed to go. I would get magnetized, and there's local teachers, there's big teachers, there's books, there's trainings, like you'll get pulled into it. There's medicine workers, right? There's all kinds of things that you can do. And so when that intention is true, I do think it magnetizes you to a place where you can develop your skills and your abilities. So the other thing I wanted to know about is one of the things that always stayed with me, right? We had a friend when we lived at the Queendom. She was looking for a house over and over again. We were at a house meeting. She couldn't find a house. And there was like this destructive, painful, epic story about how no houses existed. And you were like, look at the negative prayers that you're putting into the space. What would happen if you prayed differently? And I loved that because, you know, we all know power of positive thinking and like whatever. But I don't think anyone had ever pointed out a negative prayer with such crystal clarity before. And it always stayed with me. And it's interesting because I had a relationship where he basically was like, if we get together, X, Y, and Z will happen, and you'll go free, and you'll have your amazing LA life, and you'll leave me for all these reasons, and it'll be devastating, and I'll have to pick up the pieces. And it unfolded exactly like that. He was a very powerful being. And I remembered thinking, I was like, his negative prayer outprayed my positive one. And he wouldn't join me in positive prayer. He stayed in the negative prayer. And he got what he prayed for. And so the power of our prayer is so potent. So many people are putting negative prayers into the space constantly. So my question to you is, how do you pray positive?
The only two things that I really know how to do in life is to play and pray. Everything else,
now you know how to pleasure a pussy just a little bit more.
A little bit more on that, on the play, emphasis on the play. And everything else is sort of like winging it. I'm just trying to figure it out as I go along. Like I'm trying to figure out how to build a business where there's no education around building a business. It's just sort of like unfolding.
What is this fiat currency?
And the prayer for me is, I've been given the gift of oration in this lifetime, and as have you, and I used
there could be like Blue was spitting some hardcore spiritual truths that were life changing, and Layla kept chewing ice into the microphone.
I told you, ASMR, it's a really great idea. You should just chew ice. It would just like be the thing that really pops off.
We're in a really hot room right now, and this ice is good, yo.
And I believe that whether you want to call it prayer, spell casting, manifesting, we are always manifesting consciously or unconsciously all the time, even when we're asleep. And we're also praying all the time. We pray with our thoughts. And so if I'm thinking about 60,000 thoughts a day, and I'm realizing that every single thought is monitored in the Akashic record, the space where it's like the cosmic iCloud that is just storing every thought, word, and deed and action. And then once I started to really actually genuinely understand that, I stopped praying for that I didn't want, which means focusing my attention and intention onto the things that are like the worst case scenario. And it's a training of the brain. It does not happen overnight. But first and foremost, you've got to call yourself forward the way that you're speaking, because everything's subjective to whatever story you place on it. So for example, if somebody withdraws their love, and then all of a sudden there's this neutral space in the middle, well, what happens is we're going to project onto that neutral space all of our greatest fears. But that's actually not the truth of what's happening. And suffering happens, and this is Byron Katie's work. Suffering, I find that also suffering happens when there's three types of businesses. There's my business, your business, and God's business. And I suffer when I'm in anybody else's business besides my own. And so what I do is like to bring my energy back from why I think, why did Layla not text me back? Or why did this guy say this thing? Or why did this happen, right? I'm never going to know. But I will only suffer in the times when I'm trying to predict it, because I'm going to project my deepest insecurities as to why this is happening, because that must be a self-fulfilling prophecy of like my greatest fears to confirm that it's real. So once I would pulled back my energy from anybody else's business besides my business, then once I'm back in my business, it's now rewriting the stories of that which I'd like to create. And so when I'm in the shower, that's neutral space. That's in between time. That's the mundane moment that I was talking about before. But when you're in the mundane moment, what would it look like to sing? To sing about every little cell in my body is happy, every little cell in my body as well. What a great use of time. I'm talking to every 75 trillion cells in my body, telling my body that I am alive, I am well, I am happy. And my little cells have two jobs: to listen and respond. And they go, yes, we are. Da, 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 da. Okay, so there's that in between moment. Also, when I'm going through an unworthiness piece and I feel like absolute crap, what would it look like to treat myself like my 12-year-old daughter? I don't have one, but if I was to have a daughter and she came over to me, she goes, Mama, I'm hurting. I hurt my leg. I wouldn't be like, get it together, woman. Get out of here. You know, I would be like, come in. Let me hold you. Let me nourish you. Let me nurture you. What would it look like to actually do that to myself? That was never in the question before, because I was unconsciously being run by the unconscious prayers, spells, manifestation of an unconscious mind. So once you create the thoughts to be conscious from the back end, or like the rear view or the blind spot, and bring them into the conscious mind to start become aware of my thoughts, then realizing that my thoughts are actually my prayer, and I have an opportunity to pray for that which I want, because worrying is just like sitting on a rocking horse. It'll give me something to do, but it's going to take me absolutely nowhere. I'm not going to move forward. I'm just going to pray for that I don't want. And so once it becomes a conscious understanding that we are always manifesting consciously or unconsciously, why don't we start doing it in a conscious way and actually start to fill in the in-between moments, the mundane moments, with a prayer of gratitude? Because when you literally reflect on the things that you have in your life, even if that's a roof over your head and food in your fridge, that's more than most. And to really reflect on gratitude, a heart of gratitude will always have more things to be grateful for. And so what would it look like to actually utilize the in-between moments to say thank you? And in that thank you, a world can be born. And it starts an entire new path of living a life of gratitude. Even standing in TSA and there's a really long line and just feeling a little bit stressed, and we're like, and thank you for this too, because I even have the funds to be able to get on this flight in the first place. And so it just is, it doesn't become a belief. It doesn't become a way of life. It just is who you are. It becomes who you are. And I can tell you right now that I'm instantly repelled from somebody that's constantly negative. Well, if the universe doesn't actually give you what you want, it gives you who you are, and you're being negative, what do you expect to happen? The universe does not give you what you want. The universe gives you who you are in every given moment. If I'm singing the Happy Self song in my shower in the morning, well, who I am in that moment, having a good damn time. Good damn time.
Look, I saw it so up close and personal, and with someone who their negative prayers destroyed more beauty than I've ever seen, destroyed more goodness than I've ever seen. Just like a negativity of the mind, like just cut everything, and we're all doing some version of it. And because I looked into that mirror, like I'm a tantrika, so I like the shadow. But what I've realized is to hold ritual space where I can face down my deepest fears and make peace with them is different than a negative prayer. So negative prayer is when I'm constantly worrying and attaching charged energy to the worst possible thing, to the negative outcome. It's driving anxiety in my body and my nervous system. It's driving fear. So what I'll do is create a ritual space to go to the center of my deepest terrors and fears, meet them there and say, I'll love you anyways. You will belong to me forever, even if we fail, even if we suffer, even if we have problems, or even if I end up, whatever, broke, alone, whatever, not fulfilled, lose my community, whatever these terrors are. I face them head on and realize that I could still find gratitude even in that life, that I would still be myself. I would still have the gift of my life even there. So like, instead of trying to avoid going to the shadow, I do it consciously and I do it fully. But letting the negativity run the script all day long, oh, what a price, right? You pay a heavy price for that. And I really, 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 like, I see that to a different degree. And the place where I'd say I changed the prayer the most that I didn't even realize was happening, my life has only gotten better. I really wish someone would have said, Layla, The older you get, the sexier you will be, the hotter you will be, the more amazing your life will be, the more like outrageously good everything will be. Everyone was like, after 25, good luck. You know, it's like the greatest lie that women are told. And I realized there's still this kind of background thing of like, it's going to get worse, it's going to get worse, it's going to get worse. I was like, wait, the fuck? It's not like, it's just gotten better and better forever and ever. What if I held that? That every single moment, every single year of my life will get more fucking amazing. That I will be happy at age 96, sexier, having more amazing orgasms, healthier than I am now. Why not hold that? And instead of it just being my mind trying to say that and my whole being being like, that's bullshit, I knew it to be true. I was like, my life is going to get more amazing. And I'm going to hit some shit and I'm going to have crazy and it's whatever because it's life, right? So that doesn't mean it's going to be like a walk in the park for the rest of my life. It means that I'm going to have the best fucking time ever. I'm going to continue to have the best fucking time ever. I'm going to continue to get more amazing. And I knew that. And I was like, I just prayed the most beautiful life into existence. It's amazing where we don't even realize that we're praying negativity because we just think that it's normal. But it's not. Why do we think that? It doesn't have to get worse. It could always get better.
We're inundated with negativity like constantly throughout the entire day. Totally. It is just like drilled into our consciousness, subconscious mind. If you have a TV or if you watch the news, that the foundation and default is negativity of what's going on. You go online on Instagram and there's going to be this person arguing with this person and this person popping into the chat and bringing this person down, and it's everywhere. It's so of course, you know, we feel it, and then it sneaks in. And also even like making love to somebody, that also operates as a negative default. You start taking on their thoughts.
You sure do.
So then you start processing their negativity, right? Like, so it literally comes from so many different angles. And I think that it's such a revolution in itself to actually stop feeding into the negativity within one's own psyche. That's a revolution.
Yeah.
That's the revolution that I'm here for.
Yeah.
That happens first on a personal basis. And so it's an acknowledgement of where it comes in from. And there's many different layers to that. And in addition to that, even in the acknowledgement is when we pull it into the forefront of our consciousness, and then we actually can do something about it because it's no longer a blind spot. And I can say that a lot of my life, I didn't understand the power of thoughts or the power of mind. And it wasn't until I got my gateway drug into spirituality, which was The Secret, literally like just gave me access to being like, wait, if I think about a Range Rover enough, that means I can have one? All right, I was still a little bit like immature in that, but like it started to like understand that, wait, actually my thoughts mean something? Wait, what? Why didn't no one tell me this in school? I'm just figuring out fucking algebra. Why didn't you tell me
gateway
about
drug? Our friend Mia was like, my gateway to spirituality was conspiracy theories. I was like, what was my gateway to spirituality? And I was like, realizing that God wasn't going to burn me in hell.
Yeah, I mean, there's many different gateways out there. Choose your own experience.
Totally. And I will say, like, this is one of my revelations recently. Like, negativity is a defense mechanism. Again, like, it's a protector against the great beauty within us. We develop negativity when we don't feel like it's safe to be in our full beauty and power. But every painful expression of the ego that I found in the world is a way to protect ourselves from the infinite good, beauty, and blessing that is. So even though we can understand that negativity and have compassion for it, it can still be deeply toxic. And all those protective mechanisms, including that egoic delusion that keeps us out of true heart and makes us think that we're loving when actually we're still just playing the game of manipulation of the universe. It's like all of that is protector, and yet it's also the source of all the suffering in the universe. So it's wild that these things that try and protect us from the outstanding beauty, like I have this thing where it's like we're here and we're just trying to cope with all this beauty, you know, like all this amazingness. Like it's wild. Anyways, Blue, where can people work with you?
We covered some solid ground, by the way.
Sure
we
did.
went far and wide, deep and in. I love it. Alrighty. So I'm pretty active on social media on Instagram at Blue of Earth, BLU. of Earth. I also am the co-founder of a women's mystery school called Fluorescence. We have an online sisterhood where we have big sister programs, and we have women from all over the world that are like-minded individuals that find beauty and freedom of expression. It's a non-censored social media place for women, and we have meetups and marketplaces and courses and gene keys and all of the different things, and once a call, like there's like 3 calls every week, and you can just plug yourself into that and really be able to receive the wisdom of the beautiful women in that space and exchange codes and all the good stuff. We also run online programs, so it's like 7-week online programs of training. So we work with the altar, we work with the directions, we understand what it means to unpack your astrology and your gene keys, work with healing money trauma, different pillars of the temple that have supported an empowered life to be able to share those tools with others. And also I'm a host of a Deja podcast, and which is rocking. We're in season 3 right now. We're over 100 episodes in, and I interview prolific spiritual leaders as well as people that are masters at the craft while simultaneously going on a personal journey. And I share personal deep dives and unscripted moments of diving into the taboo and unpacking things that make people cringe. So all the good stuff.
Yeah, your work is incredible. You're one of the few people, when you were considering doing a professional certification, which you still might do, I was like, I would sign up for that immediately. There's very few people that I can say that about. So yeah, your work is very, very, very special. So I recommend everyone check it out. Thank you so much, Flu.
Thank you, Layla. Thanks for having me. And honored to be able to be interviewed by you and be able to have our catch up live on the podcast.
All right, I'd like to share a very quick meditation with you that you can do to take what me and Blue were discussing and to make it real inside of your life. And so this is a meditation that's going to help you listen to the impulse of energy. So what I'm going to invite you to do is to actually pick a piece of music. So like a piece of music that puts you into an expression or a feeling. So maybe with not a lot of words in it. So it could be like a slow dance piece of music, something sensual, something even classical, something that has like a melody that kind of carries you into a fluid or sensual space. And then I'm going to invite you to start standing or seated, or you can even be on all fours. Sometimes this can really work for you. And you're going to hit play on the music track. And what I'm going to invite you to do is, instead of trying to dance or move from your mind, I want you to take some deep breaths. This is going to be a meditation where you listen to the impulse of energy and let energy move your body. If you're like, how do you feel energy? Let's start with a different practice, right? You could get some of my other practices on YouTube or on my website. But for those of you who feel energy, sit, stand, or be on all fours and just follow your inner guidance. And it sounds complex, but it's simple. Instead of thinking about what you're going to do, right, which comes from here, like, oh, I should move to the beat, or I should roll around, or I should, move onto all fours if I'm sitting, as a thought, you actually let energy, and it's like an impulse within you that you can feel, guide you. And the way that you do this is by moving out of your thinking mind and literally feeling your body. When you feel your body and the sensations in your body, you'll actually feel an impulse inside of your body. Like you can see my body starts to move as I do that. That's me actually connecting to the energy that's flowing through my body. So you'll actually start to feel this impulse of what your body wants to do and how energy wants to move you. And this is the start of living less from your head and more from an impulse of life through you. And remember, you can't get it wrong. So you might be sitting there being like, am I doing it right? Am I doing it right? Just feel your body and let yourself be moved. Do it for the duration of the song. So like, let's say 3.5 to 5 minutes, depending on how long the track is. That's it. And what this will teach you to do is not only to move out of your head and into your body, but to listen to the impulse of movement of life through you, which is a totally different way to make love, to dance, to exist, to heal. It's so powerful. You can catch further episodes on Apple and Spotify. And the way to stay most connected to me and this work is to go over to laylamartin.com, sign up with your email address anywhere. You can get free practices. You can learn sex magic, energy orgasm, couple sexuality, tantra, all kinds of fun things over on the website, laylamartin.com. Sign up with your email address. You'll be connected to me. That's where I share my deepest teachings and the most powerful transmissions of my day-to-day life. You can also follow me over on Instagram at the Layla Martin and on YouTube, which is Layla Martin. Okay, I'll see you for our next episode and have the most ebullient and effervescent life.